Hello everyone, how are you guys doing today? Thanks for watching this educational video. And today I want to talk about computers. Specifically, this video is meant for people with little or no knowledge of computers and really just are wondering what a computer is and what is inside your typical computer. This video is perfect for older people that may have recently gotten a smartphone and like technology, but still feel a little scared and intimidated by your normal desktop computer. Maybe if you are in your 20s or 30s and your parents are in their 50s and 60s, let them watch this video. It will save you time. Because every time my parents or my wife's parents have questions about computers for me, they always come to me, and there are always good questions. There's no bad questions, because keep in mind that everybody that knows something about computers didn't know that when they were born. People learn this all the time, and if you want to grow as a person and if you want to grow computers, then that's great. If you want to know computers, that's great. If you want to learn more about computers, that's perfect. Thanks for tuning in. But I do recognize that older people, specifically immigrants from other computers that are not from other countries that are not as developed as the US is, might not even have any experience with really any or very little technology. And that's what this video is aimed in rectifying. We're going to try to educate people on computers. So basically, if that describes the person you are making watch this video, because I'm assuming that if you're watching this video, somebody that knows a little bit about technology is sitting you in front of this video to watch. So if that describes you, then that's perfect. You come to the right place, or the person brought you to the right place. So please enjoy. And just to make things easier for me, I will mostly talk about my personal computer that I built, and I use it to make these type of videos all the time. And to make things easier for you, I'll go slowly and clearly and talk about the weird names and acronyms that we in the tech world use. Some of them might go over your head, and that's fine. I'm just giving you that for educational purposes. But the main overview of this video is to understand what a computer is and the components of a computer. Just like you might want to know about a car and the components for a car and what they do, right? You have an engine, a transmission, the cabin, the dashboard, the steering wheel, wheels, brakes, all the major components of a system, right? And that's what we're going to do here. And this is going to be part 1 or part 2, or of 2 parts or 4 parts. I'm not sure how long I'm going to make these, but I think at least it's going to be 3 or 4 episodes. Okay, so let's get started. So what is a computer? What is a computer for? Well, your typical home computer, and work computers too as well, are typically a machine that for most of us lets us do something easier, faster, and more accurately. And we can use it for entertainment as well. I mean, you can find other videos that are entertaining. You can play music, you can play movies, anything basically that you can do in the real world, you can do with a computer if you have the skills and the correct things in the computer to get you there. So if you're confused right now about computers like these people are on the screen, that's fine, that's not a problem. You've come to the right place, like I said. And so today we're going to just focus on hardware and the parts of a computer, just like I described the parts of a car. So on the screen here you see a computer, right? A computer system. So basically anything, we're going to go over the hardware, which is basically anything that you touch, feel, and you can hold in your hand and have some weight to it. The main components that you readily see are the monitor, like you see here, which is the screen, maybe speakers if the speakers are available, or if they are not built into the monitor, because some monitors do have, like a TV, it has a speaker to the side, right? A keyboard, a mouse, or a touchpad in a big old ugly box like this one. And you can, if you stand next to it, you can hear some fan noises, and it has fans inside, so it does have moving parts. But it typically only has like 2 fans or 3 fans. My computer has 4, or actually 5, actually 7, but you can hear the fans, and you can see a lot of blinking lights on it sometimes, and then you see a lot of little connections to it. So here you see the input and output devices, which is how you communicate with the computer. So, but today, since if you've seen a computer before, you know what the parts are. You've seen those. You know what a keyboard is, which is an input device, which is here. That's a mouse. That's the monitor, and that's the box, right? And we want to focus on the box because I'm assuming that you've already seen these in somebody's house, at an office, at school, maybe if you're going to night school or something. So this is great. So we're going to focus on what's inside this box, because some people are like, oh, what's in it? People get mystified by it, right? So we're going to try to demystify that for you guys today. But before we look inside the computer, let's look at the outside. So if we focus on the ugly box that you saw, and yes, this is only one type of computers. As you saw in the previous slide, you see a lot of other types of computers, which are called different form factors, which are just basically different shapes and different sizes. But in general, all of the basic computers have these parts, which I'm going to tell you about right now. But on the outside of the box, you have many things that are sticking out of it, or that can be stuck in it. Usually on the front panel, there's a power button, which turns the computer on and off. And you can turn it off if you hold it down for like 3 or 4 seconds. But try not to do this. Some people do it, and sometimes it's necessary to do, but that can be bad for the computer. The computer doesn't really like that. Holding the power button down is kind of forcing it to shut down. It's kind of just like unplugging it, which for a TV or any other, like your fridge, sometimes that's fine because it's not really technologically superior, so it doesn't really need that. But computers are, and we'll get to that why later. So this is the front panel, and here you can see the power button. There's a reset switch, and you see some USB ports, and we'll get to what those are right now, and some audio jacks and a hard drive light. And we'll get to what that does later, but basically whenever your storage that's connected to this is working, you'll see a blinking light. So, and usually computers on the front also have a what we call a DVD drive, which is right here, or a Blu-ray drive, or a CD drive. Basically, you insert a compact disc in here and play music, movies, or even grab other programs, software, or files, other documents that you need on your computer. In my computer case, in this specific case, and that's not true for all of them, but in this one, you have the DVD drive that is surrounded by 4 red tabs around it. This is removable, and you can insert and connect another DVD drive or other parts. We will get into what you can add later on, but just that's used for expandability. Basically, you can put more stuff in it that can make your computer more usable, and you can add more things to it, right? And then back to the reset button. Some computers do have that, others do not. A lot of computers, it's very common to have these 2 audio jacks, which I mentioned before. And one of them is for a microphone, and the other one is so you can plug in your headphones or speakers. It is common to have another type of connection next to these, and that's the rectangular ports right there that you see, the black ones here. You'll see this black one, and this blue one. And these are what I already mentioned, are USB ports. And computers typically have these on them, and these are called USB Type A. USB stands for Universal Serial Bus, and it was created to try and eliminate different compatibility issues with different stuff that you can connect to the computer. And they made this so you can basically connect a lot of stuff really easily to anything, to any computer. I did mention the color. There's 2 black ones and 1 blue one, and that does mean something. The blue color means that it is at least USB Type A Generation 3. And you'll see the little diagram here. And then you see this one's white, but here it's black, and we'll get to why it's black later on. And then you have other types like Type C, a micro USB, which is usually where you connect a phone or an external storage device, and we'll get to that later. But there's different types of USB connections. But typically, when people tell you on the computer connected to the USB port, usually you connect it into one of these. Some computers have this one, but not too many. But usually you plug it into one of these. If we move to the front part, the bottom part here, the front part, this like little mesh, and this is used to get air in, because components get hot and they need to be cooled down, and that's how they pull in air to keep things down. And then once you look at the back, you'll see that that's where the air comes out from. And like I was saying, you can remove these and add extra stuff to it, and we won't get to that, but you can basically just add more hardware to your computer to make it do more things. Sometimes on the top of the computer you see this mesh style kind of also. This computer doesn't have that. This case doesn't have that. A lot of cases don't have it, but there are cases that have that, and that's just, again, to get more air into the computer. And this is the side panel. So the side panel, usually for a lot of computers that you find in the store, they're just solid black or solid. There's no mesh. For this one, there is mesh, and they have stickers on them. And you can remove this if you undo these little thumb screws. There's one down here, and you can't really see the bottom one. And there's one up here. In this specific case, you can see through it. Not too much. There are some that have glass, but in my case, I installed 2 extra fans that are different colors just for the heck of it. I mean, you can do that if you want to your computer. You don't have to. Some people do it for aesthetics. Some people do it to cool it down more, but really it's unnecessary in my case. But there are some cases that people do need it. Let's look at the back of the computer now. So once you look at the back of the computer, you can see many connections that may look like you're looking at the spacecraft that crash landed in Roswell, but rest assured that all of these connections are very useful. You may not use all of them at the same time, and different computers definitely do have different connections or different quantity of connections. But we will go over these in a separate video that will cover what they call the motherboard, which is basically where everything connects to. But for now, you can see the fan. On the top part, you see the power supply, and we'll get to that later. But you'll see some fans in the back, some mesh in the back, so you can get some air out, and that's usually where the air comes out. There's another picture of my computer with a lot of stuff connected to it, and as you can see, I don't even use all of them. Sometimes you can't use all of them on the computer. Sometimes you can. It really depends. So now we're going to go over the inside of the computer, of the computer case, which is what they call the box that houses everything that you need for the computer to do its thing. Let's start with the first item that's in charge, and that is the CPU, or Central Processing Unit, or chip, or processor, or microchip, whatever you want to call it. Basically, this thing does all the calculations you need to run your movies. Lets you look at the internet, lets you write a paper or play music, or anything else that you want to do. This is where all the information gets processed so you can do something with the computer. This is the part of the brain that does that. And it's very important, but you don't really ever see it in the computer. So if you open up the computer, you actually don't see it. Usually it's hidden underneath a large fan with some weird metallic fins, and you can see that on the picture here on the screen. This is called a heat sink. And basically the CPU, the chip, which is right here on the lower right side, produces heat, and the heatsink basically just makes the CPU run at safe temperatures, because you can actually burn it if you run it too hot for too long. It's basically like a radiator fan in your car. is try to keep the machine working at a safe temperature so it can keep doing its thing. So the CPU can't do this alone. It needs memory to store all of the information that it's going back and forth to calculate, right? So anything that it does, anything, it requires some sort of memory so you can store the thing in, so you can actually use it and recall it, because you might need use a calculation here, it might do another calculation there, and then it needs that information for later down the line, so it will store it in what you call RAM, which is basically random access memory. And so every single computer that you run into will have a CPU and RAM. Those are the two basic things that it needs. The more RAM you have, the more room the CPU has access to, which means that the more it can do. So if you have a document open, music playing, and you are online streaming the internet and watching a video like this one, that requires more RAM. And then if you have more intense programs, that requires even more RAM. And if you're wondering what all this means, right now we are using, in my computer, and this is the modern RAM, it's called DDR4 SDRAM, and that's the modern one that we're using. They have DDR3 and DDR2, and they even have DDR5, but we use DDR4, that's the latest right now. And it basically means double data rate, 4th generation synchronous dynamic random access memory. That's why we say DDR4 SDRAM. We don't say the whole thing, because then we would never get any work done. And this is what it looks like. This, if you look at it on the computer, you will see this in there. Some computers have 1, 2, some have 4 of these. In my computer, I only have 2. And specifically, this is the one that I have in my computer right now. I actually took a picture of this when I bought it. So that's what we're using. So let's say you're done working on your paper or picture, or even moving a song over to your computer. You cannot store this in RAM. First, there's not enough of it for everything, and second, RAM is what they call volatile memory. This does not mean that it will explode or burn or poison you if you touch it. You can touch it, people touch it all the time. That's how you install it. You need to touch it and put it in the computer. It basically means that once you turn off your computer, everything stored in there gets erased. There's nothing left. And you see a picture of nice fancy RAM down there, and that's more expensive, and some people use that. You don't really have to, but it is available. It's just nicer. It just looks nicer, obviously. There is some practicality to that, but we won't get into the specifics. But so you can use this type of memory to store permanently, right? You need what they call storage. And back in the old days, we would use floppy disks, which shrunk in size. If you ever remembered seeing those, that's what they look like. But modern files require more room and faster access to it. Now we have hard drives, but even these are now getting replaced by solid state drives, which is what the next one is. They're cheap and clunky things, and they spin. You can see the disc there, it spins really, really fast, like a really fast record player. So solid state drives are just means that there are no moving parts to it, and it's really fast. And you use it in flash drives or thumb drives, if you know what that is. And these are meant to use for permanent storage. So if you turn off the computer, it'll still work next time you come to it, right? So they are better quality than the hard drives, but they are a little bit more expensive. They are getting cheaper, and many people use this and a hard drive together, and that's fine. A lot of people do that now. But now even solid state drives are getting replaced by a new type of drive, a new type of storage, which are called NVMEs. And you see this, and you can see two connections for the NVMEs down here on the right hand side, but they are both NVMEs. And so what does that mean? That stands for non-volatile memory express. So remember, we talked about volatile memory where it gets erased. This is non-volatile, which means that it doesn't get erased, and that's why we use it for permanent storage. So how does this all connect to each other? Well, we use a motherboard. That's what they call this little, it looks like a board with a lot of little things on it. It has a lot of thingies that connect, that permits everything to talk to everything else. The motherboard talks to everything and anything. If something does not get it connected to the motherboard, then you do not see it by your computer. And specifically, this is the motherboard that I have in my computer. That's the one that I have specifically, exactly this one. The brand is MSI. You see the letters right there. That's just the brand name. There's many brand names, like any other products. You know, they make a bunch of them. And if you look at the left of that motherboard, you see all these connections. And actually, these are the connections that you saw on the back. And if you go back to that part in the video, you'll see that those are the exact same connections that I have in my computer. Those are it. And there's more in my computer, but we'll talk to that in a little bit. But these are the ones that you connect to from the back, and from the front connects to the motherboard. Connect to these parts right here, and that's where the power goes. And there's more connections here, and we'll talk about that in that later video that I was telling you about. Once we talk about the motherboard and see how everything connects, right? And some computers have what you call a GPU or graphics card. GPU stands for graphic processing unit. Basically, there's like a CPU, but it is intended to do different type of math problems, and it solves those very well. These are used for games, basically. That's what I use it for. Scientific research and 3D modeling, like engineers and architects would use these. And specifically, this is the graphics card that I have in my computer, and it's kind of an entry level. It's one of the cheaper cards on the market. But for what I needed, it's perfect. And some people don't even need it, because some computers actually have a GPU right next with the CPU. So remember that little metal squarish thing that we saw, that's the CPU? Well, some computers, and that specifically that chip I showed you, that chip also does have a tiny little processing unit in there too for graphics. And basically that permits it to display something on the screen. And they're getting better. If you don't need it for the reasons I gave you, then you don't really need one of these. You really don't. My computer will, if I take this out of my computer, it will run fine. And a lot of computers that you buy in the store for just regular home use don't have this at all, actually. So you don't need it, but I do need it for some purposes, mostly playing games. So now that we talked about all the electronic components, we need to get power to them, right? So that's where the PSU comes in, and that's just called the power supply unit. This is what connects to everything that needs power and connects to the outlet in your wall. So basically it gets electricity from your house and pushes it to the computer, and the computer can do its thing. And then once you have everything plugged in correctly, and everything's getting power to it, and everything's plugged in nicely, it still won't run like a normal computer, because a normal computer needs what they call a operating system and something called a BIOS, but we won't get to that. It needs an operating system, or OS, and that's what permits the user to communicate with the computer using something we can all understand, namely the screen or the monitor, the keyboard to type, and the mouse to use to click and point. We can connect other things like a microphone, touchpad, video game controller, headphones, and basically anything else your heart desires and wallet permits. But for that, you need an operating system to run. There are several operating systems out there. There are many, actually. The one most of us use for work and at home is called Windows. But they released many versions, and they've been around for a while. Right now we're on Windows 10. Some people still use Windows 8, and others still use Windows 7. Some people I know are still Windows XP, which came out 17 years ago or 15 years ago. It's been a while. And that's really old in computer terms. Another one you might not think of when we say operating system is called Android, which is what Google uses on its phones. Apple and on the other hand, uses iOS, and that's what they call it, with a number following it indicating the version that they are on. Google also has another popular one used for cheap laptops called Chrome. Apple uses Mac OS X. Another type is called Linux, and there are many variations of this last one. You see all the logos here. Red Hat, that's the type of Linux. and then you have Google Chrome S and Android. Another interesting point is that Windows is the only one that costs money. Everything else is free. And so that's it. We went over all the parts of the computer, which are the screen, keyboard, mouse, or touchpad, the operating system, and the computer case, which houses the CPU, RAM, storage, motherboard, GPU, and PSU. And here are the different items that we went over, just to give you a refresher. And that's it. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you come back for more videos. I will catch you on my next one. Bye bye.